Hey YouTubers, and welcome back to my YouTube channel, Master That English, where we understand, analyze, and interpret the important texts and concepts that may be part of your English curriculum. Our topic for today is a translation that was originally written in Hindi, where the writer's name is Nirmal Verma. And the text that we are going to study is Guest for a Day, which translates into Hindi as Ek Din Ka Mehmaan. So, who's ready to understand this important text written in the 1960s, which talks a lot about modern family structures and how we see them? So, are you ready? Here we go. A work that was originally written in Hindi and then translated into English. Why is this text important? Let me just start with the initial way of asking you a rhetorical question. How would you feel if I would have to tell you that this text will make you understand about the modern approach with which families were going through an emotional alienation? What if I told you now we are shifting into a new structure that was starting to take its shape in the 1960s as the nuclear family? Yes. And in this story, we definitely focus on aspects of psychological realism and urban alienation. We are no longer interested in understanding what exactly goes on in the mindset of a collective whole. Because of the self centered nature, we often forget things. So, the questions that we can relate with in this particular story is: have you ever felt like a stranger in your own home? Can a father become just a guest in his daughter's life? This is what we are going to explore in this work. Nirmal Verma wrote this work in the 1960s period, where he was actively writing modern Hindi stories. It belongs to the Nai Kahani movement in Hindi literature, which focused on psychological realism and modern urban life. So, the story highlights and portrays modern family breakdowns. During the 1960s and 70s, many writers began exploring changing family structures, constant divorces happening, and emotional distance in urban life. In this story, a separated father visits his daughter and ex wife, showing the pain of a broken family relationship. To explore loneliness and alienation, the story is about a father who feels like a stranger in his own family, reflecting the loneliness of modern life. There is an influence of personal experience in this story as well, as critics note that the uneasy meeting between the separated couple in the story resembles Varma's own troubled first marriage, which influenced the emotional tone of the narrative. It shows that psychological impact is profoundly noticed in children, which is why their innocence eventually turns into mature approach in handling things. The child represents the innocent victim of the parents' separation, highlighting how family conflicts affect children. And this is why our first point of concentration should be towards the significance of the title, which is Ek Din Ka Mehmaan, or a guest for one day. It is very symbolic, as the father becomes a temporary guest in his daughter's life instead of being a permanent part of the family. It is also ironic that the father must visit his own child as a guest, as the father normally belongs in the home, but here he's treated as an outsider. Hence, the title symbolizes the broken relationship, emotional distance, and alienation within modern families. The issue that Nirmal Verma has tried to raise in this story is that relationships need time and communication. The distance between the husband and wife is clearly understood in the story. There is a disconnection in their close relationship throughout the story. And this is reflective in the very initial discourse that they have. तुमने कभी समझने की कोशिश ही नहीं की. You never tried to understand me. This is the loneliness every character shows signs of it. The father's act of reaching out to his family after 2 years shows that he is a victim of loneliness. The mother's restrained behavior and outbursts shows that she is a lonely soul. The daughter's effort to act as a mediator between the parents shows that she feels torn between the parents as well, as family is not just about living together, but feeling connected. Emotional neglect leads to permanent damage. The father's guilt brings him to the doorsteps. However, the past hangs heavily on the present and scars the future. Changing roles are a common phenomenon in this work, where before 1960s the man was the person who was expected to build a family on the financial account and also on the emotional account where it comes to the form of being a provider. But in this story, the man abandons them. And women in this situation show a sense of metamorphosis, that they are able to wear the boots and run the show just as competently. They're no longer weak. That is the mode with which women have a beautiful camouflage of or adaptation to represent themselves and unique self with the changing times. It also shows that there is an impact that is noticed in children when it comes to broken homes. Child who is a symbol of innocence and emotional connection now is the bridge between the parents. Through her, Nirmal Verma shows the impact of broken homes on children. The reality of the modern urban families. The title itself is symbolic of broken relationships, emotional distance, and alienation within modern nuclear families, as the silence in the play speaks louder than words. Throughout the plot overview, what we notice is that the father visits his estranged wife and daughter, is treated like a guest, not family, and the daughter behaves very formally, while the wife remains emotionally distant. And the story actually ends with a painful realization of broken bonds. So, the first question that arises when you read this play is, why does he return back to his family knowing the fact that he did not contribute at any level? Primarily because this desire to go back represents emotional hunger and regret. He has come to Frankfurt to present his paper at a conference, and so he decides to use the opportunity to reconnect with his daughter, as he has an intense desire to see his daughter and bond with her. He had been wondering how she had grown up in the last 2 years. Moreover, he was living away from his wife and daughter. He was also guilty of neglecting his family and was nostalgic about past. So he hoped to bridge the gap. And it is very interesting to see the kind of response the father gets when he visits his wife and daughter after this long separation. As instead of being welcomed, he gets a cold response for everything. Firstly, the house appears to be deserted. Nobody seems to be waiting for him, despite the fact that he was coming after 2 years. When after waiting for an hour outside the house, he enters. That is how alienation affects us when we are not giving value to the relationships that we have, that have been given to us. And as we move ahead, we also get to see how the daughter reacts to the father's presence. The daughter initially rushes to her father to welcome him and welcomes him down the stairs with a huge, lovable hug. She gets him a glass of water so that he could have his medicine. That shows concern. Then she prepares tea, toast, butter, and some sausages for him. But what is interesting to see here is the preparation itself shows a Western influence. We do not see the Indianized version of slow process of cooking. Everything seems hurried, fast, because nobody has the time, leisure time to sit and have a discourse. So the things have to go at a very fast pace, even in the preparation. And the items here hold a lot of significance to the modern influence that has significantly affected the family. She wants to ease the tension between him in the non-argumental zone in the kitchen, rather than keeping the parents close to each other in her mother's room. She can feel that the connect with the father despite him being far away, but all she tries to do throughout her discourse with her father is to avoid things from getting too tense in the house all throughout. And how did the father try to reconnect here? I think what is important are the symbolic items that are represented in the characters' use of products and props. I think what is important here is to understand how the father tries to connect, in fact, reconnect with the family. The father has a suitcase, and this suitcase is symbolic of representation of father's effort to reconnect. He tries to bring in things that can substitute for his love. It is also suggestive that the fact that he uses brought gifts to compensate for his absence. The gifts in the form of Rajasthani lehenga from the emporium for his daughter. He also brings in copper trinklets from Lamas for daughter, a pashmina shawl for his wife, bed covers from Gujarat emporium. All these items fail to actually echo or even give a trace of love in any way. These are valuable items that represents an idea of comfort, but it's not emotional comfort that humans think that such material items can substitute for. What does it tell you? That the reason why the family is indifferent to these items suggests that emotional presence matters more than material gestures. We can all earn and win things, but when it comes to connection, you need to be present first in order to build that connection. The cold response to his gifts is a rejection of his token of love, which he had been struggling and aspiring to build for himself in terms of name and recognition. In this way, Nirmal is highlighting that contrast between material offerings, such as the things that were there in the suitcase, and the emotional emptiness that is lack of connection. The lack of importance of the suitcase in the play highlights the emotional bonds cannot be restored through gifts alone. Wife also tries to show her emotional distance. She's showing her indifference to his presence by remaining upstairs in the bedroom for a very long time. As she has rebuilt her life single handedly, she is no longer emotionally dependent on her husband. She only comes down when she is informed by her daughter that there is a phone call for her. There is no display of anger or joy that shows the neutral notion of living in a limbo where you do not belong to the good side and nor do you belong to the hate side. She seems independent and distant. Her actions are controlled and layered. She barely acknowledges his presence and sits silently in the corner on a stool. She carries a subtle sense of betrayal beneath the calm composure. Her pain is evident in her restrained behavior. He tried to make some small conversation, but she does not show any emotional connect despite husband's nostalgic and clumsy rejections. To break the ice, he told her that he had seen a woman at the airport who looked just like her. Her mask of indifference is to protect herself as she has been betrayed in the past. Even when she refused to take his gifts, दोनों के बीच जैसे एक अदृश्य दीवार खड़ी थी. It was as if an invisible wall stood between them. The man eventually accepts that there is an invisible wall, an emotional distance, an unresolved conflict between the husband and wife. Even when they are physically close, they are emotionally far apart. When he tried to bridge the gap, calling her Muku, she said, "Leave me alone," and then lamented that her life had been wrecked by him and silently started crying. The wife's crying in the Ek Din Ka Mehmaan play is not a simple sadness. It reflects a mix of suppressed emotion, regret, and inner conflict, which is what we get to understand with the notion of nuclear families. Even though the family is small, but are you taking in the time, the quality time to sit together, have a conversation, or are just involved in your goals and aspiration? How much time do you dedicate to your relation than just the work that is giving you sustenance? We need sustenance on the emotional front as well. This is the reason why you notice that She may also be feeling guilty for not maintaining the relationship and creating a distance between father and daughter. She's crying and regretting that even though she knows that there has been a mistake from her husband's part, she too is responsible for not giving in the time or not looking out for opportunities that can build a strong connect between the father and daughter, which is also her role and responsibility as a mother. Each individual feels guilty because they feel obligated to the notion of protecting themselves first. And then, by the time they reach the point of support, it gets too late. The notion here is that of a ego and emotion. We all value ego more than just emotion because for us, ego to a certain extent or pride to a certain extent means control. This control does not let us think on the emotional front. It does not let us enjoy the significance of forgiveness. That is when you achieve the notion of gratitude and do not feel alienated in the world that we live in. Every small creature that we see around us is a reflection of what we are blessed with. We try to look at the limitations, but we never try to see the best part of it. It almost reminds me of a beautiful poem that was written by the romantic poet Coleridge, who has written this poem titled The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. In this poem, I like the way in which, by the end of the tale, where the mariner initially committed the crime of killing the bird, but in the end, the very act of blessing removes his curse, gives him freedom. I think this is what the modern family needs to understand, that the cross that they are carrying behind them can only go when there is a level of forgiveness, which is so important to evolve as individuals and come out of the helplessness that is constantly making the relationship more and more fractured. Only mature when the child sees a level of effort being done from the part of the parents, but the true maturity should not only be reflected in the child, it also has to be reflected in the parents who are torn between the two worlds and have kept their child in the center, not giving it the love and affection it requires. And I like the fact that the father in this story understands that the effort is truly tremendous on the level at which the daughter is taking her effort in order to build a kind of transparent mode of connection between them, in spite of knowing that nothing is actually working out. The line, बेटी ही उसके और घर के बीच एकमात्र कड़ी थी. The daughter was the only key between him and the house. This shows the level at which the new generation is evolving. They have to mature early. They have to understand the cause of conflicts. They have to learn that sometimes things do get ugly, even in a family, if the individuals do not pay or give respect to each other. They have to be their own nurturer because seemingly, if they are dependent, they undergo a level of avoidance. For this case, it is maturity, which I feel is so significant for kids who go through separation in their families and are forced to live in a notion of just being a band-aid, then being a person who is truly feeling a sense of comfort, enjoyment, as a child should when they are young. And I like the fact that the father acknowledges that he has not been taking care of the things as he should have, because now he does not put the blame on anybody. Now he just accepts the fact that he has done something wrong by saying that ये घर अब मेरे लिए नहीं रहा. This house no longer is mine. मैं सिर्फ एक दिन का मेहमान हूँ. I'm only a guest for a day. This is the most important line of the story, as it shows the painful realization that the father goes through, that he does not belong to this house. He truly is, as implied by the word, a guest in this house. And when he walks out of the door, the father realizes that he could never enter the emotional space of the family again. That door brings in distance, conflict, and unresolved relationships. जाते समय उसे लगा जैसे वे फिर कभी नहीं आएगा. While leaving, he felt as if he would never return again. And that is what we get to see in this beautiful short story written by Nirmal Verma. It highlights the fragmentation. Imitation often results in the notion of enjoying the benefits, but somewhere we also fail to understand what did the traditional values hold that made it possible for each and every individual to enjoy and look out for each other. Even if less is more today, there is a need for them to have a connection, build a bond, find ways in which they can connect. Maybe not at the front that we are all demanding for. There is something that we all can offer each other, but that is only possible if we respect each other for what we are doing for the other and what the other is giving us. Life turns out beautiful. Life turns out better because we are no longer looking at the grays. And this is what I feel the nuclear family has to understand if a revolution has to happen this way. I do see certain strains even in other writers who wrote at the time, like for example, the text that we have already analyzed, that is Lights Out by Manjula Padmanathan, also shows the failure of human response. People are ignorant today in the modern world because they do not understand. Human beings will go through this situation till the time we do not feel a level of connection around the environment that we live in, which is so important if we wish to evolve and become better individuals in the mode of our evolution. We need to reflect, be empathetic, and considerate to everyone around us. That brings us to the end of this lecture. I hope you enjoyed this beautiful concept that Nirmal Verma, in a way, tried to give us as a moral lesson, that life can be beautiful only when we cherish the efforts that are being given by our loved ones. Until then, take care.